One day, one little girl, one red hood, one wolf, one grandmother, one terrifying ordeal.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Little Red Riding Hood. Not to be confused with her eldest sister, Big Red Riding Hard Hat. She worked in a building site. Odd carrier. Good girl. No, this was a little one. Now, she lived with her mother, right, out in Waltham Forest, in a little cottage. Don't know what happened to the dad. He fucked off. Anyway, the problem was the cottage had no electricity or running water, so it was a bit of a nightmare. I mean, like they had candles, but they ran out in 1982, so it was grim.
London. Now, so listen up. It gives me no pleasure to admit that the cottage belonging to Mrs. Riding Hood was indeed substandard. But this all took place under the previous administration and way before my time. And for the conditions of which the house fell into disrepair, I bear no responsibility whatsoever. But in light of the story, and further that of Mrs. Riding Hood's situation, being that of a single mother, we'd be hoping to rehouse her with the utmost alacrity in suitable council accommodation sometime very, very soon. London!
Fucking Boris, what a tosser. Anyway, one day, well, I say one day, could be the next day, could be a couple of days later, it's in that week, Monday to Friday, it weren't a weekend. She said, listen, her mother, you've got to go up and see your grandmother. She's not keeping too great. You know what I mean? She's got a dodgy hip and her back's fucked. You need to go and see her. She's lying down, a bit poorly, lonely, no telly. So why don't you take a bit of cake, take a glass of wine up, look, there's a bottle, she likes a tipple, and go and see she's all right. Now fuck off.
And the kid's like, you want me to walk through a forest holding a bottle of wine? I'm 6 years old, you prick. Are you out of your fucking mind? And the mom's like, don't you fucking speak to me like that, fuckball. You go along and see your grandmother. She's fucking ill. She's not well. She said, listen to me. She's your fucking mother. She stinks. She's got a fucking wall with chandeliers hanging off it. She's your fucking mother. You go along and see her. Well, pooh, pow, ping. They had a little bit of a thing. Anyway, she kicked her out of a tumble-down shack and she went on her fucking way.
So the weird thing was, she had a wee falling out with her mother, but I'm sure they'll make up at some later date, you know. But she kicked her out the house and she's walking along this wee wood, you know. And if it's not enough to deal with the scary plants, she sees right in front of her a big pile of steaming jobby, where all these kind of middle class people with their big doggies doing big jobby curly whirlies out in the path, you know. Anyway, this is terrifying for the poor wee lassie. So she thinks, I need to get out of here. So she looks over and she sees a wee track, a wee hole in the fence, you know, and she thinks, I'm going to have that. But at the same time, I'm going to phone the council and make a complaint, because it's not a great look going to visit your grandmother with your new Red Riding Hood shoes covered in jobby, you know. Very pretty wee footwear things, you know, with a wee strap, but not so nice now that she's dragging all this keek along the path there, you know. And she thinks, my goodness, the smell's pungent. But then my grandmother pees herself, and she does the occasional jobby on herself as well. So she might no bother. The two of them sitting there over tea going, it's no me. So this wee track was her destiny in a way, you know. On her way to meet her smelly grandmother, who's in bed peeing it. Very weird, you know. It's quite sad. But kind of now and very kind of sexy as well.
Thanks, Billy. Talking of tracks, you know, Long and Winding Road, that's actually a great track. I don't mean that it's a track that, you know, you can walk along if you're going to see your grandmother, but it's a great track that you can listen to. And John and I, we kind of invented a lot of great tracks back then, you know. I was just thinking, Jojo was a man who thought he was a loner. That's a great track too. It's a very short track. And by the way, you know, if she'd taken my advice, if she'd chosen that track, she'd have been at her grandmother's in about 2 minutes.
And as young Little Red walks hesitantly, indeed furtively along the path, we hear the myriad sounds of the English countryside come to life. The buzzing of the insects, the rustling and chomping of the larger animals, and that unmistakable squeal that can only be the East Sussex chapter of the Hells Angels hurtling along the M25 at vastly unnecessary speeds on their way to Monsters of Rock at Donington.
What is wonderful about this is it's a great cinematic moment. It's perspective from Little Red's POV, a bit like when I was working with Elliot in E.T. We had the same peril in the forest. These are great images, and as I said to George, it's an incredible moment to get this in 3D or even with an English crew in an English countryside. There is no greater opportunity for a filmmaker. But she's moving toward her grandmother's, and anything could happen. She's got the wine. She's covered in shit. It's really quite a ridiculous moment, but somehow cinematically perfect.
Oh no, I couldn't sit through that at all. That's an absolute nightmare. The poor little girl, she's going through the woods, she's, carrying a bottle of wine, and she's picking flowers for a poor old grandmother who she doesn't like anyway. And then insult to injury, she hears a little rustle, lifts her head up, and out jumps a fucking wolf. Oh.
So, she's quite taken aback, because the wolf's just jumped out of the bushes. It's not very often you get to see a wolf jump out of bushes, especially one that can talk.
I'm the motherfucking wolf,
said the wolf.
You're going to visit your grandmother with a shitty little bunch of flowers and a cheap bottle of white wine.
Well, how'd you know that? Said Little Red.
Because I've read the fucking story,
said the wolf. And then he fucked off. So, Little Red gets through the woods and arrives eventually at her grandmother's house, which was in a right old state of disrepair. I mean, a proper shithole. The door was unlocked, she goes in, but above, up the stairs, into the bedroom, and there she is. The old tart, sitting upright in the bed like that.
Hi, here's a tip for you wolves who want to dress up as grannies. Firstly, it's pretty unlikely that a granny's clothes will fit, especially the knickers, because they'll look huge on most wolves. But since you'll be sitting bolt upright in bed, it won't matter because the knickers won't be seen. Just remember, it's all about the piping.
So there they are. Both of them sat there at the bed, looking at each other, strangely as they do. Grandmother, says Little Red, what big eyes you have. Which is a very strange thing to say to your grandmother. It's not the first thing you'd say. But then she was a weird child. And the grandmother says, well, all the better to see you with. Well, you'd think if she wanted to see her better, she'd have got herself some glasses, instead of making her eyes bigger. Well, anyway, who knows what goes through the mind of a 90-year-old bat, sitting there in bed, not watching any television, listening to BBC Radio 2, pissing herself in the bed and doing the occasional fart.
But the thing was, it weren't the grandmother, it was a wolf. You know what I mean?
Grandmother, says Little Red.
What big ears you have. Yes.
Now that was a bit of a low blow for Granny, because you see the thing was, all through her life, through school, she'd been teased about the size of her ears. They were fucking enormous, like lettuce leaves.
All the better to hear you with,
said the wolf.
Grandmother, says Little Red.
What big teeth you have. Yes.
Which is a weird thing to say, because she knew what kind of teeth she had. She kept them in a little glass at the side of the bed.
All the better to fucking eat you up with.
Suddenly, the wolf jumped up off the bed, and immediately her granny knickers fell down, revealing a wolf's hindquarters. And given that Little Red had never seen her granny's hindquarters before, she couldn't tell the difference.
At that very moment, Little Red jumped up, screamed, and ran out of the house, pursued by the wolf-struck granny, which everybody understands to be a symbol of the imperialist oppressors Bush and Blair. As they run around outside, they were soon to get their comeuppance, as they happened upon a lowly woodcutter wielding a gigantic chopper, he on his way to his next job, namely Bush and Blair, before they burn in the fiery pits of Hades.
Oi, wolf, you evil bastard. How dare you eat this poor kid's grandmother? What the fuck do you think you're doing? Do you know what Nemesis is?
So this is a finale. It's all very exciting. So there he is, the woodcutter, holding his axe over his shoulder like that with his shirt off, looking like Zac Efron. And then he just lunges at the wolf, right into its stomach, and the blood spurting everywhere. I've never seen so much spurting. And then, What a miracle. Out pops the grandmother, right onto the floor, fetal. Looking amazing, actually. She got 20 years younger, you know, without her knickers on. Who'd have thought?
Well, it all worked out all right. Grandmother's all right, and Mum, she got rehoused in one of Boris's council houses. Generous fella. And they made up, Mum and daughter. And Mum promised little Red that she'd never let her out a door without an armed escort. And that's no bad thing. Now fuck off.